In FII, we like to go beyond, and this is my great panel to get us there. So let me get started here. I have beside me here Barbara Belvisi. She's the founder and CEO of Interstellar Labs, so we're delighted to have you with us. Tim Ellis is with us, the CEO of Relativity Space from the US. Nicolas Guam. Nicolas, lovely to see you, co-founder and CEO of Orbit and Space Cargo Unlimited, and Emiliano Cargiman, the CEO of Satellogic. So this is my great team here, a diverse group who can really put it in perspective. And Emiliano, if I might just start with you, really looking at, is it absolutely essential that we, head to space, particularly to look for resources and, to complement, I suppose, what we're doing on Earth?
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, look, I think if we look at the big picture, humanity needs to continue to grow, right? Economic growth is, it's mandatory for us. I mean, we can't stop growth. And Earth has a resource problem, right? There's limited resources. The economic growth we have today with the resources of Earth is not sustainable long term. And I think this is one, in the big picture sense, probably one of the main reasons to look outside. The resources of space are infinitely larger than the resources on Earth. So eventually, to continue to grow, to continue to sustain the kind of growth that we've been having, doubling GDP every 40 years, we need to find a way to use the resources that exist outside of the planet and to develop an economy outside of the planet. So I think this is probably one of the main reasons why, in the big picture sense, over the next 100 years, we will be building the infrastructure of a very large economy outside of the planet.
Well, I mean, we're clearly heading that way. And Nicolas, when we think about, I suppose, once it was the domain of governments and defense, really, now it's about pretty much commercialism and, space for everybody. I mean,
yes,
that's where we're going, yeah?
Absolutely. I mean, amazing entrepreneurs like Tim and others brought the launch cost to a drastically lower point. So when you have more access to space, a lot of opportunity grow. I mean, most people say that internet couldn't have existed without all the infrastructure work done by the government, and internet couldn't have, Amazon, it's a Jeff Bezos quote, couldn't have existed without, AT&T, Federal Express, and Visa. And I guess when it comes to space, with SpaceX, with Tim, with others, you can really think about opportunities to go to space and operate there. So everybody knows about the satellite opportunities that provide a better understanding of Earth as much as SATCOM opportunity to connect better people around the world. What I'm really personally most excited is, again, being human and having human settlement on Earth in space for durable to manufacture next generation products, to actually mine resources that are indeed in scarce availability here on Earth. And that is really where commercial and private-public partnership make a huge difference.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Tim, clearly, there's big demand for launch services, and I think even, there's a backlog, I think, at the moment, but you're coming in, I suppose, in the second level category. I mean, the mega rockets, they're, we know where they're going, we've seen them, but talk to me about this sort of, I suppose, the second level launch that's not the big heavy duty ones, equally heavy duty.
Yeah, sure. So I think really, SpaceX is the only company in the last 2 decades that has built a commercially relevant, low-cost, disruptive launch. So SpaceX is one of the largest private companies in the world, $160 billion market cap business. But it's actually kind of created a problem in the industry because SpaceX, while they've been so successful, is developing their own satellite constellation called Starlink. And Starlink is, of course, providing telecom services, but they also use SpaceX for launch. So then Amazon last year bought the entire world's remaining commercial launch capacity through about 2027 for phase 1 of their satellite constellation called Kuiper. And this is before any of the other telecom companies, human spaceflight companies, other businesses have bought launches. So we're seeing there's a big supply gap for medium to heavy lift launch. That's where Relativity is now squarely focused, is on building the next alternative to SpaceX's Falcon 9 and Starship rockets. So Treanor, which is our reusable launch vehicle, is about 40% larger than Falcon 9. So it is actually a medium to heavy lift rocket.
Yes.
But what is clear is there has to be a second disruptive launch company in the world because SpaceX is at risk of building a space monopoly, which will not actually be good for humanity and good for the rest of these companies and countries that want to build capabilities in space. So that's the big opportunity that we see.
And it's working so far, which is so great. Congratulations on all the work you're doing. Now, Barbara, clearly the momentum is happening, and the next step, I suppose, will be to build and really grow an ecosystem. Talk to us a little bit about the great work that you're doing, and why is it important to now, be looking at this? The hardware seems to be in place.
Exactly. So those guys are working on bringing things in space to simplify, and I'm working on creating the structure so we can bring life. I'm mostly focusing on botanical life, so recreating small biospheres inside which we control the system, optimize the use of resources so we can bring other forms of life, plant life, insects, mushrooms, and not only humans and robots. Well, if you consider robots as life. So that's what we've been doing, and it's very important. Well, for a different reason. Why is it important to grow plants in space? The first one is for food production purposes. After 6 months, pre-packaged food in space degrades, so if you think about long-term mission, you still need to provide nutrients for the astronaut, so that's what we're focusing on. The second part is life science research, because plants behave in a different way with the lack of microgravity and solar radiation. So they will produce more of the molecule that we need here on Earth for medicinal, nutraceutical, pharmaceutical, or cosmetic purposes. So there is a huge commercial potential to grow live plants in space.
No, it is. It's a very exciting project, and we'll hear a lot more about it. Nicolas, when we think about who's going to space, when that, over the next few decades, when people are heading to space, what kind of people need to be there first? Who are they going to be? What are they going to do? Give us a feel for that and why it really matters. I can't imagine it being too much fun there. It's fun if you want to go exploring, but after that, what do you do on a late evening, which you don't realize it's late evening?
You can look at Earth, and that's a very shocking experience, an inspiring one. There are less than 600 people that went to space at this time, and in the last 24 months, about a little less than 100 people could fly to space with commercial means. Most of them at suborbital level, but quite a few went to the space station, paying a very sizable ticket. It's around $55 million to go to space and spend a week there. So today, it's really for very wealthy individuals. But price will go down. A Starship from SpaceX will bring the cost down. Other options and solutions are being developed. A lot of commercial space stations are coming in line. Axiom has a space hotel planned. And most of the actual space company, Blue Origin, SpaceX, others, maybe you, Tim, will actually look at the way we're going to bring more humans into space. Why do we go there? Mainly to build, grow, and bring humanity to the next phase of its development. As Emilio said, there's a lot of resources to harvest. I'm personally involved in another company than Orbit, dealing with in-space manufacturing. There's a lot of products, very high-value product you can make in space for Earth, that you cannot make or very difficultly make on Earth. So Orbit mission has been really to get people ready for this trip, because it is indeed a demanding one. You don't really strap yourself on a rocket, go there and experience the microgravity, the very challenging sometimes to the human body, but also to the mental state and the stability. So we are building at Orbit a very significant campus to be able to train everybody interested to go to space, learn how to operate in space for pleasure today, for profession tomorrow. There's really a huge amount of backlog, and certainly there are more than 2,000 people that actually pre-purchase tickets, and it's size about 25 million people interested in the space journey. So quite exciting to build the drugs of tomorrow, find the resources we need back on Earth. I would add to this a little more spiritual perspective. When you see Earth from above, when you have what is called the overview effect, you actually are really captured by the fragility of our planet. And I think that even though the future humanity is in space, we should not compromise our own planet, of course. So it's really for that too that we need to go to space.
We can all be zen in space. Maybe it'll be a good spot for me to go. Emilio, talk to me about, we look at the infrastructure here on Earth, that there's still a lot of infrastructure that needs to be perhaps upgraded. But talk to me a little bit about the infrastructure in space. What is there and what needs to be built?
Yeah, well, everything needs to be built, right? I think today we are mostly building infrastructure in orbit for planet Earth, right? In our company, we're building a constellation of satellites to monitor in real time what happens on the planet. Other people is building communication networks, communication infrastructure today for planet Earth, right? We're mostly building for planet Earth. I think when you look at infrastructure, you look at transport, Tim is building, or means of getting off Earth, but then there is a number of companies building transport infrastructure that will take things from different places in orbit to other places in orbit, right? So there's transport infrastructure. You have to look at communication infrastructure for planet Earth, but also looking at developing the cislunar space, what happens beyond Earth and up to the moon. Energy infrastructure, right? Same thing that we have to do on Earth. How do you provide and how do you support an economy in outer space would require its own energy infrastructure. So space-based solar, for example, is an upcoming field of development. Space-based nuclear power, another upcoming field of development. So I think when you start to look at infrastructure, it's transport, it's communications, it's energy, all of the things will need to happen and will need to be developed outside of the planet the same way we're developing to sustain an economy in planet, right?
Now, Barbara, last year when we spoke, you were, I suppose, on the big food and plant drive. But, I mean, in a year, bring us up to date with what you've been doing. What's been happening?
What happened? I think since last year we delivered a first prototype to NASA, to NASA Kennedy Space Center. So we've been testing the growth of microgreens, vegetables, some insects and mushrooms as well. So we recreated a mini biosphere within 9 cubes that fits into a space station. That's what we did last year. We're going to deliver the second prototype for June. It's going to be tested with astronauts to see if they can interact with the machine without involving too much human intervention. So we're really trying to automatize. I cannot announce, unfortunately, today a partnership that happened thanks to the one person that I met in our panel last year. But there is something going on. So I cannot give details because it's going to be released in a month.
Okay.
But there is something very exciting that's coming up that we're going to do on the moon with this company. Well, if you look at who was here last year, you might figure it out.
We'll all look back at who was on the panel last year. But how exciting.
It's super cool. And that's on the space business. But to finance the company, to be a sustainable company, we are developing product that we sell to customers on Earth, like cosmetics and pharmaceutical company. And so this year, we signed 2 big contracts, one with the leading natural ingredients company on the planet, which is Moderator, and the second one with L'Oréal. So we're really optimizing the conditions. So we're adapting space technology to design like super advanced greenhouses here, and we found the market. And so it's really, really exciting. And now we're building a factory, so a factory for biopods. So they're going to be...
Where are you building that?
Southeast of Paris, and the second one will be in Texas, hopefully. Voilà. So
No,
that was a lot for 12 months.
And I think that's so exciting to hear that some of the big international, multinational companies are also getting involved. People like that I mightn't have thought of. So that's...
Yeah, and they're very interested about the space application as well, because their business is to extract from the plants molecule that they price very, high value molecule that they put in cream, they can sell and make like billions of revenue out of it. But if you think about space, the lack of gravity and solar radiation trigger the production of unique molecules. So this is priceless for them to finance a space mission where they're going to find new molecules. So we're basically bringing the cosmetics and pharmaceutical to space exploration.
Wow. Tim, you mentioned telecommunications in space, and maybe you'd elaborate a little bit on what more can be done there. But also maybe look at the public-private partnerships that we probably need to develop a lot more.
Sure. So I think telecom in space is actually fairly straightforward. It's really just telecom infrastructure moving from Earth's surface into space. I think this is really going to look very similar to the CapEx cycles you see in terrestrial networks. So similar to 2G moving to 3G, LTE, 5G, that lasts every 3 to 5 years. The number of satellites that are launched in space for LEO satellite constellations are going to need to be replaced every 3 to 5 years. There's currently thousands of satellites in space. There's planned to be tens of thousands of satellites. So not only is SpaceX developing their own satellite constellation, so is Amazon. Of course, Apple has the SOS feature on the iPhone, so direct-to-cell is starting to be a bigger player in space. I think going from SOS to text message, voice, data. Actually, SpaceX just announced they're doing that in the next couple of years. So there's many companies that are going to be building capabilities in space. Iridium is doing direct-to-cell connectivity in a partnership with Qualcomm, with every Qualcomm chip globally. So overall, we see this really kind of exacerbating a launch supply and demand imbalance over the next decade. We really see the launch market being about $46 billion per year in the next 10 years. Half of that will just be SpaceX taking their own satellites and their own demand. But that really leaves about $23 billion per year of unmet launch capacity needs. And so that's really where Relativity is squarely focused. So to date, we've sold a little under $2 billion in launches. We're actually in active negotiation for about $7.5 billion of additional launch contracts. These are all 65-page purchase orders for launch, so people are buying well in advance because it's not clear there is a second launch company that's going to be as good as SpaceX. We've hired most of the core team that developed Falcon 9, the Dragon program, Falcon Heavy, Starship. So of our 1,100 people that we have, about 400 or so came from SpaceX. It's most of the core exec team that helped lead that company over the last 15 years. And they've joined us because it's clear there must be a second company. They did it once. I think they're all excited to do it again, but do it with 3D printing technology, which is unique to Relativity, and that's going to allow us to iterate our products much quicker and ultimately build a scaled launch company that can serve that demand and really ramp our production capacity and supply very quickly. And so that's where we're going. So from an infrastructure perspective, of course, you need a few things to get a rocket to work, besides just the rocket and the team to build it. So you need a launch site. In that case, Relativity is only the 4th company to ever have our own launch site in the US, in Cape Canaveral. The first was a company called United Launch Alliance, which is a JV of Boeing, Lockheed Martin. Then there was SpaceX, and then Blue Origin, which is where I worked before I worked with Jeff Bezos to start the metal 3D printing division at Blue Origin, in addition to doing propulsion work. So then Relativity's number 4. We got one of the last available launch sites in Cape Canaveral. And then we've got a 100,000 square meter factory in Los Angeles. It's the old C-17 manufacturing plant. And then now we own 2/3 of NASA's Stennis Space Center exclusively for the next 20 years. We have about $1 billion of free infrastructure from NASA. Those are very important public-private partnerships that have allowed us to actually now build a rocket that can go compete with SpaceX at that scale. Really, without the government support for those partnerships and all this free infrastructure, it just would not have been possible. So it's definitely been a big enabler for what we're doing.
No, it's a great story and well done. I mean, it's so exciting, I think, to hear so much that is going on out there. Nikolai, when we look at resources like space mining, critical minerals, asteroids, all of that, I mean, what can we learn, I suppose, from space that's really going to add value here? Because right now, that's what has to be happening. I think that we're doing this with purpose.
Yes, so resources are available. Now, it's really back to what we were discussing earlier, is how you access those resources. I think the most exciting opportunities, and Barbara alluded to it, is really manufacturing in space. There's a particular condition of absence of gravity, along with some level of radiation, allows in the topics of life science, of new materials, electronics, to build high-value product. And just to give a few examples, if you blend a material on Earth, the two materials, the heavier one is going to go down because of gravity, the lighter goes up. So you don't have a perfect blend. In space, the same process will make them much stronger, and you can have bulk metallic glass, which is quite difficult to manufacture on Earth. You have fiber optics you can create that are 100 times more conductive in space because they use a material that is very hard to synthesize on Earth, and you can do it well in space. And life science is even more exciting, the way you can do drug development, looking at protein crystallization, where you can have much easier to study proteins to develop new drugs. Space provide that. So as we move forward with a more permanent base, we'll be able to create the high-value product. I tend to believe the next industrial revolution will actually happen in space.
Wow. There's a lot to look forward to. But Emiliano, who owns space, so to speak? Talk a little bit about the geopolitics, because the geopolitics on Earth are a little scary right now. What's going to happen in
You're
space?
giving me the easy question.
Yeah, that's an easy question.
So who owns space? Well, nobody owns space, right? Space is a commons in a sense. But I think what's interesting, if you look from geopolitics side, or I would say the astropolitics side in this case.
The astropolitics, I like that.
I think what's super interesting is space is a little bit like the high seas, but the main difference is every country in the world has a border with it, right? And I think that's very unique. That makes it very unique, right? as a political sphere, it makes it very unique because now every country in the world is connected to every other country in the world through this, specific sea, if you want, that is space. And that makes it, and will make it, I think, more and more over the next few decades, a, geopolitically relevant and disputed territory. And we're starting to see that. I think we're starting to see that, space is becoming more and more part of the defense posture of countries. Space is becoming more and more a significant part of the strategic thinking. And as we start to develop resources outside of Earth, that's only going to increase, right? But even looking at Earth alone, space is starting to become a significantly more disputed territory than it ever was. I think that is going to have an impact into all of the businesses that we're building here, and probably into politics of most of the countries in the world.
Tim, what about that regulatory environment, or is there one forming around it, and who gets to go, and what do we need to be worried about?
Yeah, of course. It's something I put a little bit of personal time on. In the US, we have something called the National Space Council, and there's a user advisory group. So it's commercial companies that are leading in the country to help advise on some of this. And so as part of that, there's different strategic areas that at least the US is looking at. A lot of it is with global collaboration. So I get asked a lot about space debris, and is space junk a really big problem? Actually, the number one cause of space debris is actually what's called ASAT missile tests, where countries have intentionally launched missiles to destroy their own satellites as a show of defense capability in the case of wartime. So satellites provide a very strategic kind of resource for militaries, whether it's communication, missile warning satellites, weather, et cetera. And so actually, most kind of space assets do have a national defense and strategic capabilities. So that's the number one cause of space debris, is all of the untraceable debris from these tests. When you really think about it, though, from a rate-limiting step perspective, the number of satellites that can be in orbit is actually quite high. So they all have propulsion systems, they all have a lot of fault tolerance, so they can do automatic collision and avoidance detection that already happens today. Spectrum rights is another kind of rate-limiting step, but there's actually quite a bit of spectrum still available. We're not at the case where there's so many satellites in orbit that you can't launch more without interference. There's different bands, whether it's S-band, Ka, Ku, that different constellations kind of operate at. And so actually we're at a system where I think we have gigabytes or gigabits per second of total capacity, but we actually have a pretty clear view to getting to petabits. And once you get to petabits, now you're at a system that can serve tens of millions to maybe even hundreds of millions of users globally. And then that really is the basis that'll underpin the space economy growing from about 500 billion per year globally today to about $1 trillion per year over the next couple decades, which is the forecasted growth of space.
It's unbelievable. Barbara, now you need to have many alliances and agreements to get your products up there. In terms of who regulates what, how do you manage to, who picks you, or who do you pick?
Okay, well, we are very space agency agnostic, but the reality is that the space agency that is leading the Artemis program and space exploration in general is NASA. So our choice was so I started by creating a US entity, and then we have a French subsidiary, so we get grant funding and partnership with NASA on the US entity, and at the same time through the French subsidiary, we can work with the European Space Agency and the French Space Agency. So so we go through the existing system, being international as well. I'm a strong believer in public-private partnership as well. I believe the governments are here to help financing the R&D and the capex of facilities and factories. Our facility in France is 60% financed by the French government, and most of our activity in the United States is financed by NASA. But the truth is, if you want to be a sustainable business, you need to find customers, private companies. So it's this combination of the two that is allowing companies to develop much faster than ever before.
Nicola, clearly it sort of feels like the first mover advantage. It's almost Christopher Columbus and friends and the new guys. But talk to us just a little bit, because if we've nothing to do for a long weekend, we can all join Nicolas and actually train to go to space. I've seen the pictures. Yeah, you need a good checkbook there for sure. But again, it'll come down as we go. But clearly it is about first mover advantage right now, is it?
Yes, I mean, there's obviously a Chinese-American space race for who's going to go first to the moon. China want to be there by 2030. I do not know about where NASA stands in that calendar, but it's fairly aggressive. At the same time, going back to the public-private partnership, it's fascinating to see that more humans have been into space with commercial means than ever, and this is only going to grow as price goes down. So our mission at Orbit is actually to train you. So indeed, if you want to touch the space experience one way or the other, you're very welcome to my hotel in the southwest of France where we organize trainings. We also organize a few in the Four Seasons in Orlando, and I'll be more than happy to give you a zero-G, high-G
This is not institutional
training.
type, army type training either. This is pretty chic.
It's a high-level
the
experience.
Food in space, what they're
Yes,
working on.
we accommodate a lot of variety of costs and pricing, but it's as rigorous as the Army and
Yes,
NASA would
okay.
provide you with. But it's interesting because, back to this, we all understand why we want to go to space. We understand the resources, the need. But I was kind of shocked to realize that very little is put on the actual human experience. There was this moment where I was in the control room of one of the space operators, which I will not name. There were about 300 people flying people into space. And then when the actual people returned on Earth, by the time the vehicle was safely back on Earth, everybody left the room. And we were only two technicians and my team at Orbit to listen to the people that went to space sharing their experience. It seemed that, weirdly enough, they don't take so much attention to the very transformative experience of going to space. So one of the missions of Orbit is really to help seize, obviously have the technical knowledge and the preparation, and the physical preparation to be able to face the human voyage, but also really bring something back for the rest of us, bring something back for humanity here on Earth, because it is a transformative, really a journey. And as we go into permanent settlement, we'll need more people like Orbit training and preparing for space.
No, it sounds very exciting. We have to wrap this up. Just a quick word from each of you. Emiliano, what do you really hope is the next sort of big thing to happen, and how quick? Are we now at a point where there's no turning back on this?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, over the next, I think we're now building the building blocks, right? The infrastructure pieces that to develop a very large economy outside of the planet, right? The first goal, obviously, is develop this infrastructure to help planet Earth, to help us here, right? This is what we are doing at SatLogic, remapping the Earth to help us manage our resources better, right? And a lot of the systems that we're putting in place today are for planet Earth. I think the next step is for us to start developing a sustainable economy off Earth, and that's probably going to start in low Earth orbit and eventually move towards the moon, right? And I think that's what we can expect over the probably next 20 years.
Yeah, it's exciting. Nicolas, what's next for you?
Well, as I think we could converge that space has a lot to offer. So I believe strongly in space manufacturing for the next class of product we need on Earth. I also believe that humanity needs to get prepared and ready with the proper training to get there.
Well, absolutely. Tim, just a quick wrap-up call to action for you.
Yeah, I think, so we're very squarely focused on being the next great launch company. There has to be two, so I'm very, very focused on that. If we don't have launch, we won't have anything in space, so it's absolutely vital and strategically important.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think we have a lot of momentum to go do that and be the next launch company, so that's what we're focused on.
And clearly the demand is there, so well done. Barbara, I'll give you the closing word, because you're going to really help us live better there.
I believe over the 5 coming years, something transformational can happen for humanity. And if we manage, so humans going to go back to the moon. This time, eventually, we can bring a small greenhouse. And I think if humanity can see that we can bring life in space, then we will have hope that we can preserve biodiversity on Earth. So that's what I'm fighting for.
Yes, so we have to be able to do both. Thank you so much. A big round of applause to my panel here, Emiliano, Nikolai, Tim, and Barbara. Thank you so much. And so that's our next vacation we'll be planning, huh? Well done. Thank you so much. It's been great to have you all here. And thank you all for coming to join us.